Hi guys, from Pax Europiana here again from Frankfurt, from the Willy Brandt-Platz. Yeah? That's the square for Willy Brandt, the former German Chancellor of 69 to 74. He was from the left. Yeah? And it's very meaningful today to make this video because maybe we will get his left-wing Chancellor as well. And he was in many ways the Chancellor of Peace. Here this whole area is called the Friedenstraße, the Peace Street. And he was the Chancellor of Appeasement, depending how you like it, yeah? But certainly he was also the Chancellor of European unification. That's the Europe sign I made the video before. And now I would like to talk about his historic legacy and what Ostpolitik means and why the Germany and Austria are trying to copy him today in a kind of misunderstanding. But the idea is, and that's called Ostpolitik, it's the idea when a weaker Germany, which is not able militarily to confront the Soviet Union, to try to buy as much as possible from Russia, which unfortunately has nothing else but uranium and gas and petrol, and weapons. Weapons you don't want to buy when you are for peace, so you need to buy energy. And that logic is called Ostpolitik. You engage Germany, to Russia, Soviet Union at that time, but it's the same logic today with what they have basically. You don't want their tanks in that time they were obviously in Eastern Germany, now in Ukraine, and the logic is because you don't want their tanks, you buy their energy. This is the logic of Willy Brandt, and in a way they today still see him as the most successful hero of peace. I think he was a typical Central European appeaser, anti-American, like Kreisky, like Olaf Palme. This was the phalanx of appeasement, of anti-Americanism of the European left. But in their own thinking, they are obviously very proud about themselves because they think and they have led to the end of the Soviet Union. The logic is not very logic, but we have to work with it because the next Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, who probably will run Germany and build Nord Stream 3 or 4 or 5. He was raised in that tradition, so it's very meaningful to understand it and to also understand the myth. Willy Brandt actually got toppled then later, not at least by his own party, and then Schmidt came because he had the Eastern Germans also didn't trust him, and they put a very high-ranking spy into his office. And they intervened so heavily in the Western German system that this all somehow was exposed, and so he had to resign because basically the Eastern Germans toppled him because they probably thought he was not enough for appeasement, because ultimately to fully leave NATO and neutralize Germany, that was not going to happen, even in the terrible 70s, in the most weakest phase of the West, in which maybe some people think we are entering in, or we are already since 2013. I think it's not that bad, but we are, because Russia is not that strong, but they have now this alliance with China, so we are in a difficult period, there's no doubt about it. Yeah? And the question is, will there be a new Willy Brandt in Germany, or it will stay a pro-Western ally fully committed towards NATO and towards the West, and towards the European Union? That's, I think, the question now at this election day. And every voter in Germany has to think about it very intensively. Do you want a repeat of the terrible 70s and the inflation, the kind of defeatism, which now is called peace policy, and the resulting terrible 70s? Because let's never forget, the 70s was the most disaster period of the Western world since World War II. I mean, we lost every year several countries to the Soviet Union. It was a complete disaster in Eastern Europe. Yeah? It was a disaster on all possible areas. Yeah? The Soviets were dominating, and they were also dominating because they had the financial means. Ostpolitik meant that we gave the access to the Western European rich consumers to the Russian energy companies and to the Russian state, basically. That means the reason why the Soviet Union fell only so late was that they had all the money in the world because of the Austrian gas link of OMV from 68 onwards, and then the whole 70s they could sell make a huge fortune in this energy crisis is because was first energy shock of 73 because of the Middle East war, the second one because of Iran, the oil price, and of course Nixon's end of the of the gold system, and this led to a huge increase of the energy prices. And who was the big winner? Like today as well, financially, it is the Soviet Union and Russia, because they exploit obviously the environment very negatively. Don't forget that, yeah. And they exploit under the worst condition Siberia and treasures, and they send it then to the Western European consumers. We, at much overrated oligopolistic prices, we have to subsidize the Russian state or the Soviet Union before, and then they can do aggressions today in Ukraine and before in Angola or Namibia or wherever they did. And they had the resources to spend a global campaign of aggression from 68 in the Czech Republic towards 79 and then the whole 80s in Afghanistan. This is the legacy of Ostpolitik. So Ostpolitik might sound smart, yeah? We buy them in. But in the case of a very aggressive power, you know, it is no goodwill. That's the problem. Because I am for the famous thing which many now make jokes about it, the so-called Handel durch Wandel for China. Yes, that was very successful because there is no aggressive bad intention in China. So they get rich, we get actually rich with China as well. Yeah? That makes sense because the core of the Chinese system is not the aggressive export of the ideology to the world. Yeah? But in Soviet Union and in Russia today under Putin, it is exactly that the problem. So if the core is rotten and aggressive, and then you fund it, then it leads just to more aggression. In the case of the Chinese, it led to a practically successful engagement, and they are not only selling uranium or petrol, but they're selling useful things which the world wants. So everybody gets better by trade. Yeah? So that's the big difference between Wandel durch Handel, which basically the mainstream German thinking for China is since the last 30 years, and by the way also the American one with the most favored nation status, and the German particularity with Austria together of Ostpolitik by Willy Brandt, which is not starve the beast but feed the beast. And that's what he did, and that's what the Austrians did, and they thought they are very much for peace because the peace rhetoric of Soviet Union was big. While they were attacking every year, they were aggressing several countries from 68 when the Chinese actually ran away from the Soviets because of the invasion to Czechoslovakia. And the same invasion led to the Western European left to think we have to be much nicer to the Soviet Union because they could be more aggressive if we are not much nicer, and just to a little bit of aggression we have to appease. Yeah? And that's the bizarre logic of Ostpolitik. Yeah? To this day many people think it's a cool thing and they adore, they really admire Willy Brandt for his wisdom, for leadership. And I repeat, here in Frankfurt there is this Peace Street here, Friedenstraße, at Willy Brandt Square, most prominently. And I'm sure in Berlin there is much more. I will maybe come one day. But the basic is like that. And the basic thinking like that Russia just needs to be bought into the world system to be good. Yeah? This is still the mainstream thinking. And it will come more and more. You see, when Olaf Scholz will be elected, the first topic we will have the opening of OECD membership with Russia, and so on and so on. And they will not be expelled from the G20, which they should, and so on and so on. And there will be a lot of more this kind of Willy Brandt style appeasement proposals, and they will lead us totally astray. And that together with the Trumpian kind of China bashing, which Biden is also somehow has adopted, we are in a complete mess geostrategically. And that's very worrying. So I hope really that there will be no second Willy Brandt in the German prime ministership from this October onwards after the German elections. And I hope there will be a more reasonable Jamaica-style coalition between the CDU, the FDP and the Green Party, and that there will be a human rights-oriented, peace-oriented, but containment of dictatorship-oriented policy, who is really aware of the true nature of Putin's aggressive system from Belarus to Donbass to Crimea, and this must be contained. And containment is what ultimately brought down the Soviet Union. That was what, or rollback if you want, yeah? That was what Reagan did, and Reagan brought down the Soviet Union, not Willy Brandt, yeah? To be very clear. Willy Brandt extended the already failing system of the Soviet Union for another decade or 15 years, and that was a big failure. It was a big failure, Ostpolitik, and it shouldn't be repeated. Unfortunately, we still are banned for that, because also commercially it's very lucrative. The gas is cheap and the kickbacks are high. And so, unfortunately, under the kind of umbrella or smokescreen of Ostpolitik and of decency and good policy, good neighborhood with Russia, a lot of people get very rich and they think it's very cool. Actually, just a few people who get very rich, because obviously that's just these commissions and these kickbacks are just for the select few. That's the situation here from Frankfurt. I want to thank you for your attention. Please oppose Ostpolitik and appeasement where you can, and especially, you know, now they have done it. Most Germans and Austrian politicians know that it's wrong and know the profit and benefit and kickback system behind it. They are not silly, they know all these things. But what is important is that at least when it's now reality, that now at least Ukraine gets the NATO membership, the EU membership, and first of all, the most important, the euro for Ukraine, because that can be done so easily. And I hope at least from the pro-European side there will be clarity in understanding that Ukraine should, and also Moldova, Georgia, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia, Macedonia, and also Romania obviously, and hopefully also in the tradition of Willy Brandt to do something really for Poland, and not just a gesture only, but also make everything possible to convince Poland to join the Eurozone, because that would lift them to the next level of prosperity, and that they have very much deserved after all the tragedies of the 20th century. So that would be really the best way. And maybe that will be the direction, unifying project for the next German government, Eurozone enlargement, and the euro as currency for all pro-European countries from Eastern Europe, the euro as peace project, the euro as unification project, and then also later NATO and EU membership attached to the kind of prepared ground of Euroized Eastern Europe. I think that's a very good idea, and I hope that this will be the future. And that's my wish from this beautiful capital of peace and of prosperity. And I show you some of the skyscrapers still. It's quite impressive here in Frankfurt. They call it Manhattan, the city at the mine, and a little bit of Manhattan should be here as well. And you have the flair of that here if you see the towers of the European financial industry. Based on the euro, prosperity is happening amazingly. So thanks a lot, best regards, and for a very strong Europe, but please no Ostpolitik, no appeasement, and more unity and more enlargement. That would be good. Thanks a lot, all the best. See you.